Ethan Carter adjusted the baseball cap low over his forehead, the brim casting a shadow that disguised the sharp intensity of his gaze. The mirrored glass of the bistro's front window reflected a man he barely recognized, dressed in a faded gray hoodie and worn jeans, a stark contrast to the tailored suits that usually hung from his frame. He exhaled slowly, gripping the door handle. This wasn't just an unannounced visit. This was a reckoning. Carter's Bistro had been his dream, built from the ground up with the intention of fostering not just great food, but a great environment. Yet, something had gone terribly wrong. Customer complaints had tripled. Employee turnover was at an all-time high, and there were whispers of internal mismanagement. The reports from corporate were sterile, devoid of any real insight. If he wanted to know the truth, he had to live it. The scent of baked crust and melting cheese wrapped around him as he stepped inside, warm and inviting. The illusion shattered almost immediately. A teenage hostess at the front barely glanced up from her phone before giving a mechanical "Table for one?" Her monotone voice carried the weight of boredom, and the dark circles beneath her eyes suggested exhaustion rather than indifference. Ethan shook his head. "Actually, I'm here about the job opening." She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, Rick handles hiring. Let me get him." She disappeared into the back, leaving Ethan standing in the middle of the floor, taking in the details with a critical eye. Tables sat uncleared, sticky with the remnants of past customers. A young waiter with curly hair maneuvered around them with the speed of someone trying to survive, not serve. Behind the counter, a woman in her mid-20s stacked plates, her sleeves pushed up past her elbows. Unlike the others, she radiated a quiet efficiency, moving with the precision of someone who cared about her work. Ethan noted the way she glanced toward the kitchen door every few seconds, eyes sharpening with unease each time it swung open. The door in question burst open with a crash. A stocky man in a too-tight button-down stomped out, his expression set in a permanent scowl. "Rick." He barely looked at Ethan before barking. "You're here for the job?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, dishwasher." Rick grunted, flipping through a clipboard without any real interest. "Experience?" "Some." It wasn't a lie. Ethan had done every job in his restaurants at some point, but that was years ago. Rick snorted. "Fine. You work a trial shift tonight. No screw-ups. If you last, maybe you get a schedule. Don't expect much pay. And no free food." Ethan forced himself to nod, ignoring the irritation crawling up his spine. He hadn't expected a warm welcome, but the sheer disregard in Rick's tone confirmed his suspicions. This was a man who didn't see his employees as people. As soon as Rick disappeared back into his office, the waitress from earlier approached, wiping her hands on a towel. "You must be new," she said, her voice softer than he expected. "I'm Sophie." "Ben," he introduced himself, the alias rolling off his tongue smoothly. She studied him, head tilting. "You don't look like a guy who washes dishes for a living." Ethan smiled, keeping it easy. "You don't look like someone who enjoys working here." She laughed, but there was no real humor in it. "Fair enough." She lowered her voice. "Rick's a nightmare. Just keep your head down, do your job, and don't cross him." Ethan filed that away, but before he could probe further, Sophie's attention snapped toward the other end of the room. Two waiters, a lanky man with nervous energy and a shorter one with sharp eyes, were hunched near the register, whispering urgently. Their hands moved subtly, their shoulders tight with unease. Then Ethan heard it. "Rick's been taking from the tip pool again. If we say anything." The rest was drowned out by the clang of a tray hitting the floor, but Ethan had heard enough. His stomach twisted. The rumors weren't just rumors. Something was very, very wrong in his own restaurant, and he intended to find out exactly what. The clang of dishes and the hum of conversation filled the kitchen, but Ethan barely heard any of it. The words from the waiters earlier still echoed in his mind. Rick was stealing from the tip pool. That in itself was infuriating, but it also begged the question, what else was happening under his nose? He forced his hands steady as he scrubbed a plate under steaming water. The last thing he needed was to draw attention. If he acted too quickly, he'd spook them. If he waited too long, the damage could deepen. For now, the only move was to watch. through the kitchen's open window. He had a clear view of the dining area. Sophie maneuvered between tables with practiced ease, though Ethan noticed how she avoided eye contact with Rick whenever he passed. The two waiters, Jake and Luis, worked in tense silence, shoulders hunched as if bracing for something. Even the hostess looked uneasy, her gaze flicking toward Rick every time she handed customers their checks. Then there was Rick himself. He stomped through the restaurant like a man who had never been told no. Every movement, every glance, radiated dominance. Employees stiffened when he walked by. Conversations died. He wasn't just managing this bistro. He was ruling it through fear. Ethan had dealt with men like him before. They wielded authority like a weapon, confident that no one would dare challenge them. The question wasn't whether Rick was corrupt. That much was clear. The question was how deep the rot ran. A sharp hiss of pain jolted Ethan from his thoughts. He looked down to see a thin line of red beading along his finger, a casualty of his distracted dishwashing. Sophie was suddenly at his side, pressing a napkin into his palm. "Careful," she murmured. "This place will eat you alive if you let it." There was something in her voice, something beyond simple caution. A warning. He met her gaze, searching for meaning. But before he could say anything, Rick's voice cut through the air. "Luis. Back room. Now." Luis stiffened. His fingers curled into fists before he forced them to relax. With a glance at Jake, who gave the barest shake of his head, he turned and followed Rick through the swinging door. Ethan set down the plate in his hands. Moments later, muffled voices bled through the walls. Then, Rick's voice, low and threatening. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" A pause. I don't know what you mean." Luis's voice was too high, too quick. "You're talking too much. You want to keep your job, you keep your mouth shut. Understand?" Silence. Then, a dull thud, followed by the clatter of something hitting the floor. Ethan was already moving. He barely registered Sophie's hand gripping his wrist, holding him back. "Don't," she whispered urgently. "Not yet." The door swung open, and Luis stepped out, his face pale. He didn't look at anyone as he returned to the floor, his movements stiff and mechanical. Rick followed a moment later, adjusting the sleeves of his shirt with the casual ease of a man who knew he wouldn't be challenged. Ethan's hands curled into fists. That night, as the last customers filtered out and the bistro prepared to close, he found Jake and Luis huddled near the back exit. Their voices were hushed, urgent. "We have to do something," Luis was saying. "This isn't just about tips anymore." He broke off, glancing around before lowering his voice. "He's messing with ours, cutting people's pay and logging false numbers in the system." Jake swore under his breath. "If we report it, we'll get fired," Luis finished. "Or worse." Ethan stepped forward. "What if the owner found out?" Both men spun to face him, startled. For a moment, suspicion clouded their features. Then Jake sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. "The owner doesn't care," he muttered. "He's never here. He's probably just another rich guy who sees this place as numbers on a spreadsheet." Ethan bit back his immediate response. Instead, he said, "What if I told you to wait one more day?" Luis frowned. "Why?" "Just trust me." Neither man looked convinced, but after a moment, Jake nodded. Luis hesitated, then did the same. Ethan turned, exhaling slowly. His pulse pounded in his ears. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning air was crisp, but Ethan felt none of it. His mind was a storm, the weight of the coming confrontation pressing against his ribs like a vice. He had spent years building Carter's Bistro, pouring his heart into the foundation of something he believed in. To see it twisted into this, into a place of fear, manipulation, and outright theft, was a betrayal he hadn't seen coming. But today that changed. When he stepped through the bistro's doors, he didn't go to the kitchen. He didn't grab an apron or head for the dish pit. He walked straight to the center of the floor, where employees bustled through the morning prep. The air carried the usual sense of fresh dough and simmering sauce, but beneath it was something heavier. Anxiety, exhaustion, quiet resignation. Rick stood by the counter, leaning over Sophie as she counted the cash drawer. His voice was low, his posture predatory, and Sophie's shoulders were locked in tension. Ethan clenched his jaw. He had seen enough. The moment Rick glanced up, irritation flickered across his face. "Why the hell aren't you in the back?" Ethan didn't answer. He reached up, pulling off the faded baseball cap he had worn since day one. Then, with deliberate precision, he straightened to his full height and met Rick's eyes. The confusion in them was brief. Then realization set in. The color drained from Rick's face. Ethan let the silence stretch, watching the man squirm under the weight of it. "Rick," he said, his voice smooth but ice cold. "Let's talk." The bistro had gone still. Employees frozen mid-task, customers pausing mid-conversation. Sophie's hand was still on the register, her fingers hovering over the buttons, as if any movement would shatter whatever fragile moment had gripped the air. Rick forced a laugh, but it was thin, brittle. "Talk. About what?" He gestured around with false bravado. "You, here to finally check on your investment?" "I'm here," Ethan said, "because my employees are afraid of you." A hush fell over the restaurant. Rick's jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous." Ethan tilted his head. "Is it? Then why did I spend the past few days watching you steal their tips? Why did I hear you threatening Luis? Why is half the staff too afraid to even look you in the eye?" Rick's composure cracked, but he covered it quickly with a sneer. "You've been spying? What, you think you're some kind of hero? You don't know how things actually work, Carter. You sit in your nice office while the rest of us deal with the real world." "The real world," Ethan repeated, voice deceptively soft. "You mean a world where you line your pockets with my employees' money? Where you cut hours and falsify reports so corporate doesn't notice your theft?" He took a step forward, his presence pressing down like a storm about to break. "Tell me, Rick, how does that world work?" Rick's gaze darted around, searching for an escape. Look, this is all just a misunderstanding." "No," Ethan interrupted, his voice razor-sharp. "A misunderstanding is a scheduling error. A miscalculated order. This." He gestured toward the staff, their wide, uncertain eyes. "This is something else." Sophie spoke then, her voice steady but edged with something raw. "You stole from us. You threatened us." She looked around at her co-workers, and for the first time they looked back at her, not with fear, but with something else. Something stronger. "We deserve better." Rick scoffed, his bravado slipping into something uglier. "You think he cares?" He jabbed a finger toward Ethan. "You're all just numbers to him. He's only here now because he got bored of playing boss from a distance." Ethan let out a slow breath, controlled, measured. "You want to know why I'm here, Rick?" He turned slightly, addressing the entire room now. "Because I built this place to be more than a business. I built it to be a second home for people who work their asses off. And somehow, I let someone like you take that away from them." A flicker of uncertainty passed through the employees. Ethan met their eyes, one by one. "That changes today." Then, without breaking eye contact, he pulled his phone from his pocket, dialed a number, and lifted it to his ear. "Yeah," he said, his voice carrying through the silent room. "I need security at Carter's Bistro. And HR. Now." Rick blanched. "Wait. You're done," Ethan said simply. It took less than 15 minutes. Security arrived, followed by a corporate HR representative who had clearly been briefed in advance. The moment Ethan had made the call, Rick had tried to argue, bluster his way through, but there was no winning against the sheer weight of truth. He was escorted out, his protests turning to curses, then silence as the doors shut behind him. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air inside the bistro felt lighter. Ethan turned back to the staff. They were still standing there, uncertain, like prisoners who had just been told the gates were open but were too afraid to step outside. He set his hands on the counter and met their eyes. "You're not just employees," he said. "You're the reason this place exists. And I won't make the mistake of forgetting that again." Luis, still pale but steady, exhaled sharply. "So what happens now?" Ethan smiled. "Now, we rebuild." The bistro felt different in the days following Rick's removal. The air was lighter, conversations no longer hushed. and employees moved with a sense of relief rather than fear. But relief alone wouldn't fix the damage. Ethan knew that. The scars of mismanagement ran deep, and trust, once broken, was not easily restored. On his first official day back, as the visible owner, he arrived early. The restaurant was quiet in the morning light, the scent of brewing coffee mingling with fresh dough. Sophie was already there, rearranging the seating chart. She looked up, hesitated for a moment, then nodded in greeting. "You're here early," she said. "So are you." She smirked. "Habit." Then, after a pause, she added, "People don't know what to expect from you now." Ethan leaned against the counter. "What do you think they expect? That you'll disappear again?" The honesty in her voice cut deeper than she probably intended. "That you made a big show of things, but once the dust settles, we'll be left to fend for ourselves." He studied her, the way she kept her hands busy, the guarded way she spoke. She wasn't accusing him. She was testing him. "I'm not going anywhere," he said simply. She held his gaze for a moment before nodding. "Good." By midday, the usual lunch rush was in full swing. Ethan didn't retreat to an office. Instead, he worked the floor, bussing tables, running food, refilling drinks. Customers recognized him now, whispering when he passed, but he ignored the curiosity. He wasn't here to impress them. He was here to prove himself to the people who had been keeping this place running long before he stepped back through the doors. When he stopped by the kitchen, he found Louise plating an order with steady hands, the tension he once carried now replaced with quiet focus. Jake worked beside him, the two slipping into an easy rhythm that had been missing before. The staff wasn't just adjusting, they were healing. At closing, Ethan gathered them all together. Some stood with arms crossed, others fidgeted, uncertain. He knew trust wasn't won with words alone, but this conversation needed to happen. "I won't pretend I can fix everything overnight," he started. "I should have been here sooner. I should have seen what was happening. That's on me." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "And now," he said, "we make this place what it was meant to be. That starts with fair pay, clear policies, and accountability, mine included." Louise let out a breath. "You mean that?" Ethan nodded. "Hold me to it." A pause. Then one by one, the employees nodded. It wasn't full trust, not yet, but it was a start. As Ethan locked up that night, he took one last look around. Carter's Bistro wasn't just a business. It was a promise. And this time, he wouldn't break it.